Welcome to the fifth meeting of the 2021 Swift Otter Challenge to become Magento certified. I'm excited to have you all here as we discuss what's it gonna be like. And I'm going to walk through the entire test taking experience. And for some of you, you've already walked through that. And, I would be really interested to hear your comments in the chat as we go through this. What was it like for you? Because the last test I took was before the Adobe transition, and there have been a couple of changes. For example, new test providers. So, and obviously there's the great debate as we've had in our Slack channel about whether it is Examity or PSI, which is better for at-home test taking. So, welcome to this. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I know for a couple of you, I'm sure in the on the West Coast, I know it kind of stinks. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. Here it's 8 o'clock, and for those of you in India, it's all the way up till 7:30 p.m. So welcome. It's good to have you all here. It'd just be interesting to see everybody who is on currently. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment just to say how your last week has gone in regards to studying. Were you able to get much studying done this last week? Because again, this is a certification challenge, right? I love to put all the inspiration out there I can, but ultimately at the end of the day, if you're not going to be able to take or pass that test, what good does it do to have this challenge put on? So I want to hear how everybody is doing, and especially how has it been going with regards to your studies as you're preparing to take your test here in this past week. My week has been wonderful and especially exciting because it feels like spring has arrived here in Kansas. Now, for those of you that don't know, I can assure you that spring has not arrived here in Kansas, simply because warm weather in March means that there will be cold weather also in March or April. It is just how it works in Kansas because no matter how excited you get about, maybe spring is here to stay, I can guarantee you it's not here to stay. And unfortunately, warm weather earlier is very bad for the fruit trees. We have a lot of apple trees, and I think that's mostly we have just apple trees here. A lot of apple trees, and it's very bad for that because the apple trees, of course, start blooming, and we are guaranteed going to have some cold weather again, and possibly snow. I don't mind the snow, but I certainly don't like to see the damage to the apple trees in the area around here. So welcome. It's good to have you all on here. Let's go ahead and just get started. I always like to do shout outs for those who have passed the test. Have a number of people here in the past couple weeks who have passed the test. Many congratulations to you all. It's exciting to see the progress here. And I don't know why, but it seems like there's been a ton more successes this year than there were last year, which makes me really excited. I am very excited to see that and see how people are doing as they are preparing for and working to pass the test. And just also as a reminder, the on week, so we've been doing every other week since the beginning of the year for the certification challenge. It's more general information about working to pass the test. The off weeks, if you will, so every other week is certification challenge, but the every other week is more of a developer study group. And I know ultimately in the audience, I'm guessing at least 80% developers, and then there's 10-20% of those of you who are going for business practitioner. And actually that's something, and I would appreciate your feedback on this. If you're in the Slack channel, please feel free to just drop me a DM, tell me your thoughts on this. But I want to make this as practical for others, for people as possible. And ultimately, I've gotten the feedback that business practitioners can feel kind of left out at some points. And I don't want that to be the case. So one thing I thought about is next year, splitting it up into more or less two groups. So maybe one Saturday is developer study group, test taking ideas, etc., very geared for developers, and then the next Saturday or the every other Saturday is for business practitioners. I don't know. That is an idea I have, kind of a little bit of a reformat of the whole process. So always very appreciative of your feedback. If you want to take just a couple moments and send that over. All right. Well, studying Knockout Jazz. Good for you, Arnold. Good for you. That is excellent. Jackie says about the turn off all distractions. Yes, I get that. And especially, Jackie, I know your line of work, you must have a tremendous number of distractions in Slack and all that stuff. And unfortunately, I'm partially responsible for some of that. So, all right, this is good. And it's a good reminder, actually. Let me just put this out there again. Your studying, the quality of your studying is very dependent on your ability to, or your capability to get rid of those distractions. And, for me, it's my phone sitting here on my desk. It's so easy to let those emails come in. It's like, ooh, I got to respond to that email right away. And usually I have some latitude, unless it's, of course, one of those barn burner site is going down or site is down and you got to get this fixed ASAP. That's maybe you break study for that. But otherwise, just the more you can turn off those distractions, you can keep out of email, you can turn on Do Not Disturb on your computer, you can close Slack, whatever it takes. That is the key to a quality study time. And it's difficult, right? You're on your computer that you use all day, every day for all your other distractions. And so how you turn that off, how you kind of mentally check into a different mode, it can be difficult. I totally get that, and it's a struggle for me. It's a struggle for me, and I'm just going to put it this way. So every Saturday I do a lot of this training development, that kind of stuff, and today's no different. And it is a huge challenge for me to stay focused on what I'm doing. It's easy to just kind of go down rabbit trails, and of course it doesn't provide value to the final end goal that I'm working towards. All right. Yes, excellent. One thing I'm going to throw out there, Mike, great question, is Vinay Kop's, he has Vinay Kop Mage 2 TV. He has a great, a lot of tutorials on UI components, Knockout, by extension Knockout. There's a lot of conversation about that. So I think you would gain a lot of value from that. And the thing I love about what he does is he starts from a very basic level, like the minimum viable product. We all like that term, but he really does start with that. And he builds on and extrapolates on it. And I found it is very helpful. All right, let's continue on. Now, we've talked about preparing for this test, and we've worked through in one of the previous meetings these practice tests. Practice tests are really, I believe, important simply because they help you, how do I say this? They help you simulate the environment in which you are going to be taking your test as much as possible. And ultimately, the practice test itself can only do so much, but it's up to you to take this to the next level. For example, are you going to allow yourself to be distracted? Are you going to or are you going to be focused and try to simulate as much of this test-taking environment as possible? So it does also come back to you a little bit if you're willing to take those measures to focus on this practice test. The other key point to practice tests is that you do not look at the answers until you are basically ready to take the test. The answers, once you look at the answers, the value of the test is greatly reduced and maybe even eliminated. The story that it goes for me is, and I've seen this happen. So the practice tests that we offer we have unlimited tests for a month, and that's what most people would choose instead of just doing the one take. And I have literally seen some people in there that take the test 50 to 100 times. Now, I can't prove it's not multiple people. It could be multiple people, but 50 to 100 times. And we have then had people come back to us and saying, I got 100% on the last, X number of times I took this test, and it's usually a high number of times, but I failed the real test. And, I want the materials that we put out to be really helpful. I want them to be everything you need in order to pass the test. Of course, with extra study and that sort of thing, but basically what you need to pass the test. And then when that doesn't happen, that makes me really upset. Like I want it to be the case. So how do I suggest? So it's helped. It's pushed me in a direction to kind of refine how I encourage people to use these practice tests. And in fact, actually today, I am releasing an update to the website whereby we are no longer going to be selling unlimited practice tests. And people might say, well, it's a price increase. No, I mean, yes, it could be ultimately, but that's 100% not the goal. The goal is to help people become more successful, and that's why I've introduced a lot of changes to the whole practice test system over the past year. I would say one of those being it's much harder to find where to see the answers. I want those answers to be hidden, not invisible, but somewhat hidden, so that people are more likely to take the test, write down those areas that they felt were very difficult for them, those questions that just were hard to understand, and then they go back through, find the answers for those, then they can take the test again. And finally, at the end, they can do a quick review to see, okay, how does my answers line up with the answers, the correct answers? Hey, Simon, welcome. Come on in. So that's where the value of the practice test, I believe, really shines. And to be frank, the other thing is I've gotten some pushback on, and I love pushback on practice test questions, by the way. So if you have a concern, you think something is not right or not worded 100% correctly, feel free to email me, and I will happily look into it. But just so you know, there might be a couple of questions that I will come back to you and say, I would like for you to find the answer on. And the reason is because this is a critical topic, and I need it, and it's very important for you to understand this. And I am 100% convinced that I'm right. And if in those cases, I will push back on you and I will say, hey, my friend, I need you to take a look at this because this is important for your study. So just keep that in mind as well. So practice tests, I believe, are very, very important in helping you prepare for the real test. But let's take it a little bit further. Where do I take the test? And I know for a number of you, you have, actually, COVID's kind of changed this quite a little. The test centers are much less of an option than they used to be. But Arnold's, let me answer this question here real quick. What's the replacement plan for the unlimited practice tests? I am going to be selling them and call it bundles. So basically you have, on some of the tests, it might be 5 takes of the test or 10 takes. I haven't necessarily nailed down the number specifically, but you'll get like a package of 5 takes or 10 takes, and it'll be, hugely discounted, versus unlimited, meaning like as many times as you want to take in a month. And again, I hope that helps people value the tests more at that case, and take it more seriously, which is totally what my goal is there. All right, so where to take the tests? Test center or at home or in your office, i.e. home or office is one of the same there. Up until, I don't know, sometime mid last year, I was a huge proponent of take it at home, take it in your office. But then I took the JavaScript test and my opinion started changing. When I took the JavaScript test, I took it at home. In fact, I've been taking most of them at home. But for some reason, all my previous attempts at home worked really well. I mean, it was easy. There was no connection problems. The whole test taking experience was smooth. But when I took the JavaScript test, I think it was up to like a half-hour delayed. I was in chat with support. Just stuff was weird. It was just not working right. And that kind of started changing my opinion on this. So no longer am I just go take it at home or in your office where you're most comfortable, which was my spiel about that. My opinion is do what you want to do. So if you feel more comfortable in the test center, know that the test center is going to have good internet, or at least they should have good internet. So take it at the test center. It's going to be rock solid. It's going to be reliable. Or if you want to take it at home where you're comfortable, I do like to take my tests at home. This is where I'm comfortable. Take it at home. The one thing to remember is at the test center, you're going to have more distractions. If you take it, you have more distractions. So, and I remember you had these people that were sitting in their chair and rocking back and forth, presumably nervously, just rocking back and forth. And it'd be fine if the chair didn't squeak, but the chair squeaks every single time. And I'm like, there's other people in the room. I'm trying to take this test, and I hear this fairly regular interval of chair squeaking or coughing. And now, of course, with COVID, it's like, does the person next door to you have COVID? Like it can be nerve-wracking, and you're trying to focus on taking this test, and you hear all these distractions. And well, for me, those earplugs that they do give you earplugs. You pay for earplugs. That's included in your test fee. Those earplugs never fit well in my ears, and so it's like, okay, I can't really get those to fit in. And even if it did, I hate having earplugs in my ears unless I'm doing something noisy outside, because otherwise it's like I can hear myself almost think, and that's distracting. So, at the test center definitely has its downsides, but it does have its upsides in that it's reliable internet, and you're not going to have to worry about the webcam stuff or anything like that. And it's funny, I just noticed in this screenshot here, a screenshot of it. This is of some test centers in India. This, I'm probably totally mispronouncing this. It's the Sariska Tiger Reserve. That sounds like a neat place to go. All right, so schedule, and you also have to usually schedule it in advance. Like you can't just go impromptu take the test whenever you want. But there is those huge upsides of rock solid internet and no frustrations with webcams. The home office is very nice because it's very comfortable. I work here all day, every day. I know exactly the environment. It's nice and comfortable. So, yeah, I like that. But I have heard a lot of frustration, and I mean a lot of frustration about getting the computer to work right, people being locked out of their tests for a half hour or more, the tech support being slow or poor. So it's up to you, my friends. It really is up to you, and especially as it seems fairly universally around the world that a lot of places are opening up, kind of the COVID restrictions are relaxing. The test center is actually something I'm going to much more seriously consider after having that bad experience myself, as well as hearing it quite a few times from others. But if you want to take the test impromptu, or if you want to just take it in the comfort of your home and you are prepared for such a experience as having trouble having trouble with tech support, et cetera, then you would want take it at home. But at least I want to prepare you. So taking it at home in office might not be as comfortable as you want it to be. Simon prefers to take it at the test center, makes it more of an adventure. Great. Hopefully on the way home you get some ice cream or something nice cold to drink, in celebration, of course, of your hard work. All right. So how to take the test? That's where to take the test. Test centers, it's easy. Again, you can choose PSI. Examity, I think, is only online. So you go and choose the PSI test provider. Super easy. Just how do you go take the test, or where to take the test? You just choose one that's close to you. Get a cab, drive your car, whatever, to go take the test. All right, so I'm going to drop this in our Slack channel after our conversation. The link to this video. This is my story of taking the JavaScript test last year. And so feel free to watch that again, give you a bit of perspective again about taking the test at home. This was with Crypterion before Examity or PSI, and unfortunately with the problems that those providers have brought for many, many people. But then again, I did have my own problems as well with that. So feel free to watch the video and hear my experience about taking the test. Yep, there you go, Arnold's. Exactly. Yep. All right, so I want to talk about probably one of the most upsetting parts of the Magento tests. This has caused people a lot of consternation because they don't know what this stuff means. And I call it the abilities in test questions. The abilities. So you're taking your test and you see at the last sentence of the test, and actually let's jump to first to this. This is kind of the structure. I got ahead of myself in how I put my slides this morning. In this way, let's look at the structure of a test question. We have the scenario, we have the question or the stem as it's more technically called, and then we have the answers. The scenario sets up like a story, if you will. And this is the case for most Magento test questions. It's like a story that you need to fill in the blanks for. There's a lot of information in there, and there's going to be some missing details. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a minute, but I want to get the general idea out of the way so we can then talk about the abilities of a test question. But it gives a story, and then it says, what 2 steps does the merchant take to reduce this possibility? It asks you a specific question to solve. In this specific question to solve, we also can have a question that goes along the lines of keeping upgradability in mind. how do you do this? Keeping maintainability in mind, what are the 2 steps to solve this problem? Those abilities are not fun to deal with. And as such, I want to talk about what does it take to answer those. And really the solution is a bit more simple than it seems when taking the test, and that's what I want to deal with this. The abilities mean that there is at least 2 correct answers. So in this case, if we had at the beginning of this, if we had it said keeping upgradability in mind, what 2 steps does the merchant take to reduce this possibility? That means that there is at least 2 correct answers. Actually, I think they are. I'm actually going to rephrase that a little bit. I think the abilities are only in reference to, or almost always in reference to multiple choice questions or answers. So basically, yes, multiple choice. So basically, it's a radio button. It's not a square. It's one of the circle radio buttons. So it's going to you select one of the radio buttons. You have only one choice that you can get, one answer that you can get correct, or hopefully correct in this case. So keeping upgradability in mind, what steps does the merchant take to reduce this possibility? So we need to say we approach this question. Okay, there are at least 2 correct answers in here, 2 answers that will solve the latter half of this question, but only one of those answers both of these. And that's what we have to work through. Which answer is both correct and the most upgradable? So let's talk about what each one of these abilities means. So upgradability is one. I think maintainability is their favorite question. But we'll start with upgradability here. An example of this would be maybe editing a core file. We can edit the file, but it's not going to make Magento upgradable. So that would specifically shoot that answer. Even though it might be technically correct, it would help us. We would answer the question correctly. We would be able to solve this problem by editing a core Magento file in the vendor Magento directory. It's not upgradable. Now, for you, those of you solution specialists, i.e. business practitioners, you're probably not going to see upgradability that much, if any, on the test, because you're not dealing with Magento upgrades as much. And actually, probably you're not going to have as many abilities in general on this, but I think there will be a couple. So let me think of another example. I think, editing core Magento files would be one. Well, another example, if you have the choice to, how would you install this module? Basically, let's say this scenario reads something like this. You are given the choice to install a module, or where to install a module. Or actually, let me put it this way. You need to install a new module. Keeping upgradability in mind, where do you place it? Option number 1, app code. Option number 2, in Composer. Option number 3, in the lib directory. Option number 4, in the pub static directory. I'm throwing out some distractors there, which are ridiculous. And we would say, okay, well, not the pub static directory. That's ridiculous. Not the lib directory. That's ridiculous. Although technically you could do that with Composer. Well, okay, app code or vendor or Composer. Well, to satisfy the answer of this question, keeping upgradability in mind, app code is not as upgradable as it is in Composer. So we would then choose the Composer answer because that is more upgradable. So that's kind of the thought process how we would work through a question like that. Keeping maintainability in mind. This one is much less defined than it is for upgradability. And I apologize. My allergies are getting to me today. Again, I talked about the warm spring weather. We have maple trees all over the place, and they are starting to sprout their red blooms. And with that comes great allergies for me. So, I hopefully it's not distracting here. So, maintainability. How does this affect the ongoing maintenance? So, an example of that would be, let's say we have one of the answers is to create a preference. One of the answers is to create an around plugin. One of the answers is to create an after plugin. which is the most maintainable? Well, I think we would all agree that preferences are prone to breakage, right? So we create a preference for a Magento class. We upgrade from 2.4 to 2.5 when that comes out. And 2.5 brings a new constructor parameter, and the order is or the credit memo. Let's say this is in relation to a credit memo. Doesn't happen very often. Maybe QA forgets to test it. Oh, you get where I'm going. It's one of those difficult problems to initially catch, or one of those problems that's easy to overlook. So using a preference, we see the long-term effect of that could cause a lot of problems in the future. However, using an around plugin, well, that's certainly better than using a preference. But even with an around plugin, what if the method signature changes, another parameter is added? And I know Magento, if it's the app API notation, it's not supposed to change, but you never know. Like stuff can change. That's where the after plugin would be the most maintainable. And I think there would be some other examples along those lines, and I'm trying to think of another example, but a lot of that has to do with how we interact with Magento as far as editing things or that sort of thing. So maintainability in mind is often our approach to solving a problem. And again, remember, there's at least two correct answers here. Simplicity. This one is usually really fun because I find that there is, again, at least two correct answers, but one of them is stupid simple, like almost usually too simple to be true. For example, what if there's a question that says basically, how do you solve this problem? One of the answers is, well, keeping simplicity in mind, how do you solve this problem? One of the answers is is editing store config. And another answer is you creating a plugin. Now, editing store config or creating a plugin, both might work. That might be accurate, right? We could use a plugin to do it, or we could use store config. The problem in these cases is store config accurate, right? Maybe they're just blowing smoke on this store config. It could be a distractor. They could be pulling I don't know where, out of where. I mean, it's just like they're coming up with this. Is it legit? And that's where this knowledge of Magento becomes so critical, because you need to know these store configuration options, at least the most important ones, and then it helps you immediately identify it. And that's where it's a big gotcha right there, because if it is a legit store config option, well, and you choose the plugin, well, it doesn't matter. Like you got the question, you got the answer wrong because you did not keep simplicity in mind. And again, I think I've said this in the past, but I can feel like a real hero in troubleshooting a problem. Like a client gives me an issue, and this has happened a number of times, way too many times to be proud of this. But the client gives me this problem to troubleshoot, and I spend 4 hours. I download the database. I load it into my local environment. I'm troubleshooting it line by line, step by step. I got my debugger fired up. I feel like, wow, I'm this professional debugger. I get to the end of it, and I find out that it was actually a store configuration change. I could have just gone into the dumb admin, and I could have changed it there. Are you kidding me? I go from hero to zero in about, 5 seconds. It's like I finally get to the end of this loop, and I figure this out. And that has happened way too many times for me to be proud of it. But regardless, that's where this simplicity comes in. Usually it's a stupid, simple thing compared to a reasonable solution, and just watch out for that. Oh, good, Jawed. He's an honest person too. Good, that's great. It's embarrassing. It's one of those type of situations that you really wish to not tell all the other developers about, and I totally get it. But stuff happens. Yesterday, and I hate to say this, we were working on a pre-production website, and so it hasn't been launched yet, and I made a mistake. I thought I was in my local environment, changing the store URLs and all that stuff, and turns out I was on production. I felt like a genuine loser there. I wasn't careful, and that's where being careful is critical to taking these tests. And we'll talk about this in a second, but we can skip over one word, totally change the entire value change the entire meaning of a sentence or the correct answer of a question. That will happen. All right, Arnolds, what are the most important store configurations to be aware of? Happens to me. Oh, good. We have a lot of honest people here that are sharing their stories. Yep, Jackie. Yep, I get that. Once you find that store configuration, well, okay, maybe that's the case for you, but I hate to say this, but for somebody like me, you'd be surprised as still how many times I forget. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Okay, what are the most important store configurations to be aware of? My suggestion is to go through, I'm pulling this out of memory here, go through the General tab, go through the Catalog tab and the Sales tab, particularly Catalog. I think there's a Catalog inventory. The Sales, there's payment methods, shipping methods, and memorize the common configurations for each for the shipping method and payment method. Those are really important. They're pretty much the same for all shipping methods and payment methods, with some minor variations, but the ideas are usually fairly the similar. More so on shipping than payment. Then let's see here. In sales, is it sales? Sales, I think, has a lot of really interesting configurations for checkout experience. That is also important. I think that's the most important areas. Also, I just have this. I have this open right here. I watch it. Probably logged me out. Oops. Yep. It's loading up here. Let's see here. Yes, it's advanced admin is definitely one that you want to look at and review. A lot of these security measures, those are more found on business practitioner than I think the developer ones. But so if you're taking business practitioner, you'd want to look at that. System, yes, 100% agree. Jawad, this has a lot of important information. Not as sure as much how much is on the test, but it's still very, very important to review this. Customer configuration definitely has a couple. I don't think that many, but it still would not hurt at all to review that. But yeah, catalog definitely is catalog, and the three I mentioned is in sales, shipping methods and payment methods are the most important one there. So like catalog price, I think we talked about this a week or two ago. Talking about the price scope, very important. The suffixes, this is like search engine optimization. Again, I find that there's more store configuration, just so you're aware, on the business practitioner than there is on developer ones, but there is still enough on the developer ones to cause great problems if one is not paying attention. All right, finally, compatibility. Oh, yes, order. Thank you, Andy. Order status. Yes. I knew I was forgetting that. All right. So order status is one of those things that's tucked away that I had completely forgotten about when I took one test. I can't remember which one it was, and it just about killed me. There was, I don't know how many questions about order status on there. It seemed like it knew that I was a failure at order status. Review this section. This is very important to understand this. And ultimately, when it comes to developer tests, to understand how order status works versus order state, how all that stuff works together. So, and this panel right here is incredibly important to that. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Andy. Okay, then keeping compatibility in mind, using the order class versus order interface. There is some very difficult questions. I don't think as much on the professional developer test, but more on the expert developer test about how you handle the differences here. Because with the challenge that we all face is, I think we all would agree that using the interfaces, the service contracts, is the best practice, right? It is. But there's a lot of stuff missing from those service contracts. For example, there's a lot of, we can call, quote, get all items, right? We just call that, or order, I think, order get all items as well. I think that works as too. And it loads all the items in. But if we were to use the order interface and we wanted to get all items, we would have to load in the order item repository and a search criteria builder to be able to load all order items. Load all order items. Wow, that's a mouthful this morning. Yikes. Based off of the order ID. And it's a pain. Is it necessary? I don't know. Is it best practice? I don't know. And I think a lot of us really don't care, except that it just takes that much longer to inject 2 more dependencies into our constructor, et cetera, et cetera. But keeping compatibility in mind, you have to read those questions carefully and try to understand, are they wanting me to use the interface option, or how do they want me to answer this question? And pretty much, I think we can always be assured that the interface is the most compatible option. So whatever it takes to comply with that, that's the best. And ultimately, in my professional developer course that I've pulled together, it's AKA Basic Magento Development. We one of the areas in that, we specifically have the option of you calling order get all items versus going through it with the compatible route. And I choose the compatible route simply to teach you how to think of this in a little bit different way. The easiest option versus, call it, the more compatible long-term option. Is it worth it? That's up to you to decide. It's up to your managers, whatever, to decide. But this is how to answer those type of questions. All right. Let's talk about. We can hide that previous there. How to answer these questions. Magento questions come in 3 different formats, at least as far as the answers do. Number 1, we can do 1 out of 4. That's those radio buttons. 2 out of 4. That's those squares. And 3 out of 5. It's also those squares. We can select multiple. The difficulty with a well-written 2 out of 4 or 3 out of 5 is that it's a list of steps, and the steps are not related. If the steps are related, if there are things that you specifically know and see that work together, well, then absolutely, then that it becomes easier. But again, Peter, as he was the manager for writing these tests, and I had the pleasure of being able to help out with writing 2 of them, and he worked very hard to make sure that these questions were difficult to answer. And we'll talk about a strategy for answering them, which is this: grouping the answers. We need to group the answers whenever possible. So in this case, I think this is yes, below 2 answers are correct. So we are able to, we need to select 2 answers, and let's say we don't 100% know the answers on this. And actually, as I'm looking at this question, so this is actually a little bit, this is like Magento 2.2, so I should swap this question out. Or maybe it's a good question, right? Because it's not used anymore. Oh, I need to disappear here. All right, so basically, we need to figure out how to answer this, even if we don't 100% know the answer here. And the way to do this is to group the answers whenever possible. And this works for it works less for 3 out of 5, but it works well for for 1 out of 4 and 2 out of 4. Identify which answers seem the most similar. So looking at these, utilize the modules upgrade data class, uses the module data setup class, create a new data patch, and inject and use an instance of EAV setup. All right, so, and I think, I don't have that question in here. Okay, well, the question would have nicely helped in this process because it makes it a little more difficult to answer without having the question right here. But the idea is to say, okay, utilize the module's data, the upgrade data class, and create a new data patch. That seems similar an idea, and use the module data setup class versus inject and use the instance of EAV setup. So if we can group the answers together mentally, well, that will help us to be able to group and eliminate, and then we are able to come up with hopefully the right answer. And this is especially helpful for the 1 out of 4, because if we can group and eliminate 2 incorrect ones, then we are able to, we have a 50-50 chance of getting the question right. 50-50 chance is way better than a 25% chance. All right, let's move on to the next one. Test taking strategies. Oops, see, I need to disappear again. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, simply because I see how it helps. Oh, yeah, I can appear back. How it helps a lot of people. One of the first stories I heard of someone taking the test and failing was actually somebody that was working for me, and they took the test and they ran out of time. They hadn't even gotten through all the questions when they ran out of time. So I was like, well, but this never happened to me. So how could it happen in your case? And so I dug in and tried to understand, figure that out. And I finally, and so that's what prompted me to come up with, call it a system to take the test. And it comes down to 3 steps. 3 steps or 3 rounds of taking this test in order to be able to pass this test. Number 1, I call it the triage round. And I'm sure you've seen videos on YouTube. Here in the States, we have people that need to go places even in the middle of winter storms. And to be frank, I think there is a certain degree of excitement when it comes to driving somewhere in the middle of a winter storm. I say that if I am anywhere near normal in the United States here as a normal person here, I would be projecting my feelings on others. But and I know there's a lot of people who have to go to work, but there's others that I enjoy driving in winter storms. Let's just put it that way. It's probably I shouldn't, but there's the feeling of adrenaline, and you have to really watch and that sort of thing. And just to be clear, I do limit my driving in winter storms, but there is those times that I do also enjoy a little bit. But unfortunately, in winter storms, you don't have as much traction, you don't have as much visibility, and some people still drive fast. Some people drive slow, but some people do drive fast. And even when you do drive slow, there still is a lot of danger. There's other people who drive on the road faster than you. And there's just the thing of visibility. You can't always see what's in front of you. It's just how it works. And unfortunately, the culmination of all this stuff is a term in the United States called a pileup. And this is when a whole bunch of cars crash together. And it creates a really gnarly scene when this happens. And it seems to happen in the winter months, maybe at least once a month, and there's usually a pretty decent pileup. Happened in Texas a few weeks ago. But what the emergency responders, when they come to a scene like this, it is they are there to help everybody. But the people that they help the most and the first is those people who are in critical condition, who their life is just on the line. They're in that golden hour, and they got to get them to the hospital as quickly as possible. They come and triage these people. Now, I am so grateful. Taking a test is not like emergency responders and triaging critical patients. But it might feel like that a little bit because we want to get this test passed. We have to, we got to get this passing grade on this test because we are geared up for a celebration afterwards. It'd be really disappointing to not have that celebration. But our first round is the triage round. We got to get in there and see what this is like. Number 1, we assess the test. We triage what we are up against. Given the Magento tests, I need to update that. Yikes. They are actually 2 hours in length. We have and I would suggest taking 30 to 40 minutes for this first round. Going through 60 questions, that would be about 30 seconds a question. It might give a little bit longer. You might take a little bit less. But either way, take about 30 to 40 minutes. And remember, when you're taking the test, I've made the practice test window just as similar as I possibly can to taking the real test because I want to simulate as best as possible. And there is a timer there. And I was just alerted the other day I have a bug with a timer. It doesn't reset between test takes, and I got to get that fixed. That's on my to-do list for today. But we get through the first round. When you go through that first test, the first round of the test, every single question should have an answer. You might say, but Joseph, I don't know the answers to some of these questions. If you don't know the answers, there is a mark for review button. You can check that box. You can come back to that question at a later date. This allows you to quickly get through every question. Those easy ones are totally knocked out. Like you can't be 100% confidence, right? But it's like 95% confidence. Those easy questions are correct. Then you have the really hard ones. And those are the ones that I don't know if they're correct or not, but I need to take another some more time to review that. Get through that first round. At the end of that first round, every single one of those questions should be answered. You should be at the point that you're like, if the test was just somehow canceled right now, at least every question has an answer. Might not all be correct, but remember, for those 1 out of 4 questions, which is the majority of the questions on the test, you have a 25% chance of getting it right. As I test the practice test system, and I go through and I just mark like the first answer on every single one of them. By the way, there's a keyboard shortcut. You can type 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and it'll automatically answer the question on the practice test. I hate to say it, but taking a practice test actually has a little bit nicer of a test experience, taking experience in the real test. So hopefully you don't get spoiled on that. But I go through and mark all the answers to all the questions, like answer number 1, and go through as quickly as possible. And at the end, I usually get between a 25 and a 32% at the end. So right there, you're almost guaranteed right off the bat to get a 25% test score on your test. So anything above that begins to be your knowledge or the value that you contribute to that test, at least in my opinion. So you get through this test, you're going to at least have a 25%, and it's probably going to be more, even if it's really difficult, more like a 50% by the end of that first round. Not a passing grade, but it's still good. Then is when you start working through the difficult answers. Take 30 to 40, maybe up to an hour, and be watching the clock. Don't let the clock get away from you. Watch the clock. I mean, don't stare at it, but just at least keep a constant eye as far as what's going on here. Work through those difficult answers. Basically, what I do is you can click to see the reviewed answers. Work through those answers and say which ones are the. Let's just work through each one of those individually. Your goal is for each one of those mark for review questions to eliminate as many of those from needing to be reviewed again. So the first question, if you can sit down, read the question as much as you can. You cannot read it out loud, unfortunately, but read the question as carefully as you can in your mind. And again, I found that a single word can totally change the meaning of a question and the answers that are associated with it. Read that very carefully. Read it again very carefully. Try to think about what context can I think of it in? Have I experienced something similar to this? Use everything that you can in your power to correctly answer that question. Group the answers, eliminate answers, etc., etc. So your goal is at the end of that answering that first question, that mark for reviewed question, that you're going to have at least an 80% confidence that this is now the correct answer. In that case, if you're at least maybe 75 to 85% sure that this is now the correct answer, unmark that answer. Your goal is to eliminate, to reduce that number of questions that you need to review. Move on to the second one. Move on to the third one. Work through this process. One little trick that I have found is helpful, and it's less helpful on the Magento 2 test, but there is still some inspiration you can gain from this, is anytime you can leverage questions or answers from other different parts of the test. For example, if this is talking about, say, placing an order and a specific question about the button to place an order, something along those lines, maybe there is another question on the test or answer on the test that also somehow referenced this button to place the order. Maybe even go back and find that answer and see if it lended any inspiration or any knowledge to this difficult question you're trying to sort through. So basically, it's cross-referencing other sections of the test. Totally legit. Like, the test is there for you to use, and they're not like preventing you from. I understand some Microsoft tests, you get one chance, that's it, to be able to answer the question. That'd be difficult. That would be really, really difficult. Very stressful. But again, a Magento test, that's not like that. You can use the entire test in cross-reference, if possible, to help, again, find your answer. Work through all those reviewed answers, or mark for reviewed questions. It might take another round of this, but when you exit this, you are more than likely going to, at least in my case, I usually have at least 2 to 3 questions I just don't know the answer on. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you have not prepared for this test, if you are not knowledgeable for this test, even with all these great techniques, you're still not going to be able to pass it. There's just no way in the world you'll be able to pass it. So, keep that in mind. I remember taking the cloud developer exam. I took it, and I was like, I went into this test. I hate to say it. I was a little bit cocky about it. I was thinking, what's difficult about cloud development? I mean, this has got to be fairly easy. I mean, hosting a Magento website, you got some PHP, and I know PHP and MySQL, and I do a lot with MySQL and Nginx. I think, Nginx, and it's going to be fairly straightforward. No, it wasn't, and I got a 50% on that test, and I got a good slap on my wrist. It was embarrassing, but I came out of that test thinking, wow, that's way more difficult than I thought. And then I went back and I took it after I studied, and I remember like an 85% on it at least, and I was like, oh, that actually seemed really easy. So ultimately, these test-taking strategies help get the test out of the way to allow your knowledge to answer the questions. It's not necessarily if one's never approached a test, this is the key to be able to answer every question right. And unfortunately, I have heard of some certification exams out there, not Magento, but others, that are literally just like that. And that's whatever. That's I won't speak to those. So anyways, number 3, work through each answer again. And I like to, as much as I can, not visually, but mentally block out those answers that I've already answered every question. So I've worked to block those out. Try to re-answer the question in my head. How would I, if I'm answering this question again, how would I answer it? And consistently, every single time I take the test, I change my answers on at least 2 to 3 questions. Like, oh, I didn't see that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I cannot tell you whether I changed those to be the correct answers or the wrong answers. People often say that your first answer is usually the correct answer, and it might be. But usually in those times that I change my answer, I do keep that in mind, that my first answer is usually my correct answer. But I come back and I'm like, yeah, but maybe I just didn't see that answer. In that case, I was like, okay, well, we will change it now. But I change it very carefully and very cautiously, just because I don't want to. I'm really nervous about changing my first answer. So, anyways, that third round is the final review. Make sure you have everything answered right. For me personally, I like to take the schedule for Tuesday, and here's why. Nothing superstitious about it. Like Tuesday has the best chances of passing it, or Wednesday is best luck day or whatever. That's not it at all. I try to study 6 days a week, and I always take Sunday off from work. So I feel like Sunday is a bit of a reset day. I'm like totally in the groove all week, and I'm head down, focused and studying. And yet, when it comes to Sunday, it's kind of like a reset day. So I'm not able to invest as much into studying. Well, I don't invest anything into studying, so I'm kind of like out of it. Monday morning comes and I hit it studying again. I study Monday evening. Well, I work all day Monday, then I study Monday evening. Then I study a little bit on Tuesday morning, and then I go take the test. So that's why I say it has the best chances of passing. The other thing is take it in the morning. There was a test I think that I took in the afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock, and it's inevitable. Murphy's Law. You will have a site that goes down. You will have an emergency before you go take that test. And you're going to spend the first 15 minutes decompressing from dealing with that emergency. And that is the last thing that you want to do. So schedule the morning and ideally take the morning off so that, well, after you take the test, you can also do a little bit of celebration as well. So yeah, just make sure that you are not distracted. In closing here, I have a few more minutes. We can talk through some questions. And I know, who was it? Rex. I don't know if you're on Rex, but you asked in the certification challenge how to troubleshoot templates in a layout XML, and I'd be happy to take a couple minutes if you're on to answer that. Otherwise, maybe I'll just relegate that to our conversation next week. I bring up Smash the Bug. It's our new podcast, and this is because it's been a kind of a enlightenment over the past, 6 months to a year, that debugging, solving problems is an underdeveloped area for many developers. And my goal is to help solve that problem. And that is why I'm writing the book. And I've kind of hinted a little bit about it. And we had a great conversation in our Slack channel here the other day. Hinted about this for the Smash. The book is called Art of Debugging. And so I'm also bringing on starting a podcast called Smash the Bug, where I interview people to hear your stories about the problems that you solved, those crazy problems that just seemed unsolvable. And the reason I bring this up here is if you have one of those crazy stories to share about any platform, honestly, but again, maybe I'm more familiar with Magento, so I know more questions to ask there, you might say. But really, again, any platform, if you have a crazy story you want to share, I would love to hear it. I would love to share that with our audience. And again, it's just getting started up. I'll have more information here in the upcoming weeks. But feel free to shoot me an email, DM me on Slack, and I would love to hear your story and see about getting you scheduled on the podcast. But if you don't have a story as of yet to share, you will in the future. I can guarantee you that. But if you don't have a story as of yet, stay tuned. I will have more information about that. And the other thing is, and this is kind of a funny request, but I logged in this morning to YouTube and I saw that our subscriber count is 997. I'm really stoked about that. But what would be really cool is to get to 1,000. Like, that's a huge milestone for me. And I've been working on that to, again, get our content out. And if maybe we had the last 3 people to sign up, that would be awesome. If one of you would or a couple of you, 3 of you, just click that subscribe button. Normally I don't ask for it in that way, but yeah, if you wanted to do that, that would be awesome. So, any final questions before we wrap up our conversation today? I show it's 1 minute till, but I'm always happy to stay a couple minutes longer. Any final questions? And if there are no questions, make sure that you get your test scheduled. Getting that test scheduled is so important. It puts a date on the calendar, a line in the sand that you are going to take this test. I hope I provided a lot of great inspiration for you, a lot of great encouragement, but it's really important that I can't make you do it. And getting that test scheduled and on the calendar is so important. You got to do it. So get it on the calendar. Keep that studying going. 15 minutes a day, et cetera, et cetera. That is what you have to do in order to be successful. And of course, take this advice that you've received from me. And also, don't forget to join the Slack channel, our Slack community. If you need access to that, feel free to send me an email, joseph@swiftauto.com. I'll be happy to get you access to that. All right, so we got a couple questions here. Arnold's, what was the answer to the question about the downloads? Let's see here. Could you maybe ask that question again? I'm not seeing it in the chat logs here, but I could have missed it. Thank you, Bargev. I appreciate that. Arnold's also asked, what is the deadline for the challenge? The deadline for the challenge is the end of May. So once you get certified, make sure you schedule your certification to happen before the end of May. But once you get certified in our Slack community, on the certification challenge channel, I have a pinned message for the Google form in which you can submit your scores. And we've already had a lot of people submit their scores, and I'm super stoked about that. But I need you to submit your score so then you can be entered to win one of those Apple Watches. And if you don't want an Apple Watch, we can definitely talk about something else. So, video downloads. Oh, man. The video download samples question from the slides. Let's see here. Oh, well, let's go back and answer that question here real quick. Great. Because I did not answer that. All right. So the merchant offers the purchase of videos to their customer. They are concerned that their customers are sending the videos to their friends and would like to prevent that from happening. What 2 steps does the merchant take to reduce this possibility? Great question here. And this is from the business practitioner test. So practice test. So just keep that in mind that this is not necessarily as much for developers, but it can be still very applicable to developers. So answer number 1, configure store configuration to email the store admin each time the download is accessed. Is that possible? Well, I know that the answer is no on that question. So, but this is where the knowledge of store configuration comes in. Set shareable to be no in store configuration. Set the video's max downloads to be a small number. Have the developer install an IP address filter for these products. Now, if you and I were studying this question as in a practice test, obviously we can't do this in the real test if there was a question similar to this, but we can't do this in the real test. But our practice test, if we did not know the answer, instead of going and just selecting our best answer, which could work like near the end, which is a good idea, but for right now, what we can do is we go into store configuration. We say, okay, set store configuration to email the store admin each time the download is accessed. Well, where do we find this information here? Well, I'm in catalog, and let me just make sure my XDebug is turned off. That'll be a little faster here. Oh, and by the way, I am coming out with, for you developers, I am coming out with a course about using XDebug, and I think you'll be pretty excited about that. It'll be free, so it won't cost anything, but I think that will help your processes there and be able to master and use XDebug to its fullest. All right, so we come into catalog, and we say, is there anything in relation to downloads here? And yes, there is. So we see this list of items here. So order status to enable downloads. Use, again, just maximum number of downloads. Shareables, no. Use sample default titles, set our content disposition, disable guest cart. Actually, this is a very interesting one here. Disable guest checkout if cart contains downloadable items. Okay, so these work together. So it's very important to know how these configuration values work. But for the sake of answering this question, again, we got into this panel and we learned from it. We got the big picture from it, and so we're not devaluing the test in this way because we haven't seen the answers. But we are learning. We are using this as a catapult in this case to finding the correct answer. Okay, so so basically we see shareable to no is one of the answers in store configuration. And if we are concerned that the customer sending the videos to their friends, then we would say, we would make sure that shareable is no. In this case, it looks like it's selected to be no already. So that we would check that answer and set the video's max downloads to be a small number. Set default number of downloads. I'm guessing 0 means unlimited. So we would say, I don't know, 5 or something like that. And that would be the answer. So the correct answers would be B and C in this case. Dave, I am so glad that made your day with the debug course. That should be coming out in the next week or two. So I'll definitely drop that on our Slack channel and probably send out a full email about that. Just because, again, I so believe in it. It is a huge key to becoming a master debugger. And that is you knowing, fully mastering the capacity to use Xdebug. Awesome. Any other questions before? And yep, great answer as well, Simon. Absolutely, totally. Any other questions here before we shut this off for today? Again, it's been a pleasure being with you all. I look forward to, we're going to have another developer study group next week. And we're going to, the week after that, we're going to have our final wrap up for this certification challenge as far as our videos or inspiration for this, hopefully inspiration. But then we will continue for a couple weeks still in the developer study group, trying to hit those most difficult areas. Any other questions? Otherwise, we will wrap it up. All right. Well, it was a pleasure being with you all. I wish you a wonderful Saturday, a wonderful week ahead. Keep studying. Don't stop. Get that test scheduled. Keep going. Keep pressing toward that goal of getting that test. And make sure that when you do pass it, share the good news with the Slack community. But remember, it's not you tooting your horn as much as you being an inspiration to the rest of you. When you're struggling, you might be trying, it's like, can I do this? Can I do this? This person did it. Yes, I can do it myself. And that's what you need to do as well. So share the good news with the community. Everybody is always thrilled to hear when another person masters Magento enough to be able to pass one of those exams. So it was wonderful being with you all. Have a wonderful week. And I'll look forward to talking again with you all next Saturday.